Ramadan Kareem. Millions of Muslims around the world are fasting these days, from dawn till dusk, observing Ramadan, the holiest month in the Islamic calendar. This is usually a time for many to give, be better, and explore the deep meanings of faith. Muslims are encouraged during this month to do more prayers, recite the Quran, and practice gratitude and spiritual discipline through knowing what it means to be hungry. Nothing says Ramadan more than family and friends gathering and full dining tables in Muslim households when the sun sets with lots of delicious food choices. But this Ramadan, many are struggling to make ends meet, as the cost of living has soared globally due to crop failures, high inflation, and hikes in energy prices. For months, the national news has been tracking the prices of food staples in supermarkets across the Middle East and North Africa, where many shoppers have begun plotting shopping strategies, routinely searching for discounts and reining in on other spending, as higher prices influence their purchasing patterns. This is Beyond the Headlines. I'm Enas Refaei, and this week we're going to Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt and Jordan, where our correspondents have explored how the rising cost of living has made it difficult for many to afford basic goods and services. Of many things special about Ramadan, it's been a tradition for families to try new food recipes for iftar meals. They start observing the month with a gigantic shopping list to make sure the fridges are stocked up and ready. But the recent economic woes in some Arab countries have made it difficult this year. Some households across the region say that they're feeling the pinch as the cost of living rises, stretching their salaries and putting their weekly shopping lists under pressure. Egypt, Iraq and Lebanon have lived recently through economic challenges that are quite different in nature. But they have one thing in common: the instability of local currency against the dollar. The three countries are facing their sharpest rises in food prices this year. In late March, dozens of Beirut residents took to the streets to protest against the sharpest fall to date of the Lebanese currency.
In Lebanon this Ramadan, meat at $6 a kilogram is an ingredient of the past. Families have traded the sprawling four-course spreads typical of the holy month for cheaper ingredients, shopped for on a meal-by-meal basis as they struggle to keep up with surging food prices. Jalab, the popular Levantine Ramadan drink made of carob, dates, grape molasses, and topped with pine nuts, is also a disappearing staple. Its ingredients are simply too expensive.
This is Nada Homsi, the National's Beirut correspondent. She says that price tags in Lebanese supermarkets have returned to shelves this year, but not in the fluctuating national currency. Items are priced in the more stable dollar.
The average cost of a basic iftar dinner for a family of 5 averages at around 6 million Lebanese pounds, or around $60, according to the Crisis Observatory at the American University of Beirut. That's roughly half of what some public sector workers make in a month.
Pricing in dollars may seem more convenient for assessing the values of goods, but many Lebanese are concerned by the dollarization of their economy, as it doesn't address the issue of the collapsed local currency, as salaries in lira haven't kept pace with inflation that reached one of the highest rates in the world.
Lebanon's financial crisis, one of the worst in modern history, has further split an already polarized society. There are those who are paid in dollars and those who are paid in the unstable, almost always devaluing Lebanese currency, which has lost more than 95% of its value. That's created a pretty severe income inequality, with the vast majority of the population living under the poverty line, according to the UN, and almost half being food insecure. This Ramadan, while most families are on a strict budget, restaurants are packed by the dollared few who can still afford to go out, intensifying that economic disparity.
Years of financial corruption, political instability, and mounting public debt have dried up much of the country's sources of foreign currency. Then, the inflows of foreign cash reached critical low levels during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it got even worse after the 2020 Beirut port blast that killed more than 200 people. And from Lebanon to Iraq, where the country's currency is also under pressure. Similarly, hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Baghdad in January to protest at the recent drop in value of the dinar and the rise in food prices.
This has increased the public anger in the country against the political elite, and Iraqis started to stage protests from time to time in different cities, demanding the government to reconsider the exchange rate and introduce more measures to alleviate the poverty.
The National's correspondent in Baghdad, Sinan Mahmoud, explained that the oil-reliant economy faced several recent shocks after the coronavirus pandemic and the Ukraine war, and this has resulted in price hikes, especially for imported products.
But the latest hit was in December last year, when the US started to tighten procedures for international transfers for dollars requested by the Iraqi government to cover imports.
Since the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, the country's central bank has had dollars in the US Federal Reserve and makes monthly requests for money. But in recent months, the Fed has reduced inflows to the central bank by about 80% in a bid to combat money laundering.
Since then, the Iraqi dinar has been fluctuating sharply against the dollar in the black market. We are talking today about a huge gap between the official exchange rate, which stands at 1,300 dinars per dollar, and the exchange rate at the black market, which is around 1,500 dinars per dollar. That has pushed up the prices of different goods, mainly the imported ones, nationwide, by at least 50%, adding more burden on a nation where the national poverty rate is about 31% in a population of more than 40 million.
All of this has tightened the financial burdens on Iraqi families who have been figuring ways for years to balance their budgets.
Many Iraqi families say they have been reduced to just essentials, and the list of what they can afford is steadily shrinking. Some say they stopped buying items such as chocolates for their kids or new clothing for winter this year, and instead they used the ones they bought the year before.
As a result, shopping during Ramadan has been affected this year.
During this Ramadan, the impact is clear. Supermarkets that are giving discounts are overcrowded, unlike others. But some families are complaining that the items which are at acceptable prices for them are often of low quality.
Like Iraq and Lebanon, Egypt relies heavily on imports to feed its 106 million people and to keep many of its industries running. Prices of many essential food items such as chicken, meat, grains, and cooking oil have either doubled or tripled since last year. The National's correspondent in Cairo, Kamal Tabika, described how the consumption behaviour of Egyptians have changed.
Because of Egypt's glaring class divide, entering a supermarket in an affluent neighborhood is an entirely different experience from going to an open-air informal market, where goods are significantly cheaper. While in air-conditioned hypermarkets, food items can be found cleaned, chopped, and nicely packaged, which only adds to their cost when a shopper is checking out, alternatives from street vendors are up to 30% cheaper. This has made them more popular this year, with shoppers trying to save as much as they can.
The value of the Egyptian pound against the dollar has also dropped by more than 50% since early last year as a result of a reduction in the country's foreign reserves. And to address this, the Egyptian government tightened controls on imports to prevent the departure of scarce dollars from its economy. The import ban has led to holding up goods worth billions of dollars at the country's ports for months. This has also caused price hikes and affected Ramadan shopping lists.
To help mitigate the effects of rising inflation ahead of the holy month, Egypt's government and its armed forces launched discounted food outlets for the country's poorest, at which they can find food staples like rice, bread, and cooking oil at subsidized prices. They are typically held each year, 1 or 2 weeks before the holy month. However, this year, they were launched in January, a full 3 months before the start of Ramadan. But as Egyptians contend with price increases in almost every other part of their lives, including transportation, fuel, school fees, and healthcare, these subsidized outlets have done little to alleviate the financial pressures on average Egyptians.
The lives of millions of Egyptians have been significantly changed. Some cut out more expensive food items such as meat from their diets, while others have started to purchase cheaper food of lower quality. Even deeds of charity during Ramadan have been affected.
Additionally, a number of poor Egyptians this year have noted that charity meals and food bags which they had grown accustomed to receiving from do-gooders during the holy month in previous years, are either much smaller than they once were, or they aren't being given out at all.
In several other countries in the Middle East, governments monitor the cost of essential food items to keep inflation in check. In Jordan, for example, the situation is much better due to its stable exchange rate for years and moderate inflation levels. The National's correspondent in Amman, Khalid Yaqub, explains the reasons behind this.
In Jordan, there has been a stable peg between the Jordanian dinar and the dollar for the last several decades, ever since the Jordanian dinar collapsed in the 1980s, in the late 80s, and lost half its value. The dollar, because there is a peg, and because the dollar has been appreciating against the world's major currencies, Jordan has managed to take advantage of this dollar-dinar relationship and lessen the impact of the rising prices of basic goods worldwide, especially since the Ukraine war.
This, however, doesn't mean that food prices in Jordan are affordable.
Because the dollar has appreciated and the dinar is tied to it, the impact has not been as severe. That said, Jordan is an expensive country and people feel it when they visit Jordan. Of course, the Jordanians, especially middle-income and low-income Jordanians, feel it the most. Amman is one of the most expensive capitals in the Middle East. So the relative stability of consumer prices does not mean that they are cheap.
Jordanians, however, have been feeling the impact of the fuel price hikes recently. There was a sharp rise over the past 3 years, particularly for diesel, the fuel that powers the agricultural sector. In fact, a surge in fuel prices last year set off violent protests in the country in December, mainly in southern Jordan.
These are priced in the dollar on the world market mostly, and fuel prices have spiked. Plus, the government here does take a large chunk, maybe about 1/3 of the price at the pump, as tax. So petrol in Jordan is relatively expensive to other countries. It has risen sharply over the last several years, and people feel it in their daily lives, especially that the country has a weak public transport system. Lots of people have cars, and it affected their commute. It affected farming because diesel is the main fuel used for farming, either for pumps or for transport. So there has been a detectable price increase in Jordan, but relatively less than other countries.
Despite the rise in food prices, the International Monetary Fund believes that inflation in Jordan will remain moderate and should ease soon. As some Arab currencies decreased in value, analysts predict the pressure on Arab citizens will most likely not be alleviated anytime soon. Fears of a global recession continue as well, with the predictions that the Ukraine war will continue throughout the year and keep food and energy prices high. Thanks this week to Nader Homsi, Sinan Mahmoud, Amal Dabicha, and Khalid Yaqub. This episode was produced by Du'a Farid and Arthur Edison. This was a Beyond the Headlines, and I'm Enas Refaei. If you want all the latest episodes as soon as they come out, then just hit subscribe in your podcast app. If you can leave us a review while you're there, that makes all the difference.